What is the best example of the road to hell is paved with good intentions you have ever experienced? I am a teacher and was working at an independent school supporting struggling students. One student needed much more support than we could offer, and I spent the year coaching her parents around better options for the following year. Thankfully, her family got her into a school that better suited her educational needs, and I got laid off because our highest needs student was gone and the school felt like they no longer needed me as a result. That's more of a no good deed goes unpunished. Sympathies. A good friend of mine was going through a breakup and I was supporting her, and of course we were doing the usual rant about the ex. Cue a few days later and they get back together, and now I'm the arsehole who was talking shit behind his back. So I lost a friend because I supported her, but c'est la vie, that was a lesson learned. Edit. Lot of comments seem to imply that I was up on a soapbox ranting about this chick's ex trying to get her to hate him. It was her and I sitting on a couch, her crying ranting about what a giant dick he was. A lot of the things that she told me I didn't know were going on behind closed doors and were concerning. I said something along the effects of his behavior seems very controlling and almost abusive. So when they got back together the story turned into how I always thought that he was abusive and a piece of shit. The only part of that was even remotely true was that I did say that I always thought he was a bit rude. Honestly, a good lesson here is not to denigrate others just to make someone feel better. That's not support, it's an attempt to avenge. I grew up in a poor family with a lot of veterans in it. I was always a nerd, so even though I hadn't applied myself much in high school, I could ace an entrance exam and so was planning on going to college. Turns out, we weren't quite poor enough to qualify for enough assistance for me to go to any decent 4-year school, so I farted around for a few years, working a few random jobs and trying to find a trade that I could settle into, but with no real luck. Eventually, I did what I could to get college money. I enlisted in the army, signed up for an 8-year term. Well, I was supposed to do the last 3 years in the reserves, unless I got stopped lost. I picked a certain MOS that happened to be a combat role, because we weren't at war or close to it. It had some really good college money for the enlistment bonus, and the just under 2 years of training seemed like just the thing to prove to myself that I was as tough as I thought I was. I shipped out for OSUT in 1999. I finished all my training and got my first active duty post in August 2001. I know you're asking for specific experiences, and I may come back with one, but social media, the WWW, is my first answer. Something that was designed to bring people together and make knowledge available to all has had the exact opposite effect, and the creator of the web, Tim Berners-Lee, foresaw it all. The echo chambers, the isolated nutters who would otherwise have never found anyone who shared their delusions, the ignorance and hatred that keyboard anonymity provides. Probably most of the people who tried to get me back in contact with my parents. Too bad they had to see why I went no contact with them after I had to get multiple restraining orders. I'm hoping this will eventually become something more people understand, that being a parent doesn't mean you're a good person, and that being a good person doesn't mean you're a good parent. People loved my stepdad. He was wildly well liked by the community. He was an abusive bastard. My mom was an enabler. I cut contact, and if I had a nickel for every time I heard you should forgive them or she's your mom, you have to reconcile, I'd be able to buy a house in the nice part of Palo Alto. I'm not the only one my age, 30s, who has had to do this too. So I imagine in 20 years we'll start to see more acceptance. Hopefully you're doing better now. I know how stressful it can be going no contact. In Canada we had this COVID-19 relief program called CERB. It gives you $2,000 a month if you meet certain requirements. One of the requirements is you must make under 1K during the 1-month period. Anyway, I had a job at school that pays my full tuition directly as a scholarship, so it doesn't count as income, and get paid $300 a month, which does count as income. With my other job I make $500 a month, so I would still qualify for CERB. However, my boss at my non-school job handed out bonuses for working during COVID and mine totaled $300. I had already applied for CERB, so I had to pay back the money I had just received. Basically, instead of making just under 3K that month, almost all of which was going to paying my loans, I was only making 1.1K RIP. Benefits cliffs are so awful and so lazy. How hard is it to write in a paragraph at the end of the law to make the money variable, so you don't lose money by making money? This kind of thing makes climbing out of poverty that much harder. Most of my uncle's staff used to be ex-felons, and there's at least one more that he still has working for him, and 3 were fired a few months ago because they stole from him and almost jeopardized his business, my business, and my home. He helped them all out many times, even financially, and they turned around and stabbed him in the back. One of them I considered my friend. My favorite one was the British in India trying to cut down the number of cobras. They put out a bounty on cobras. Then industrious locals, seeing an opportunity to fleece the gringos, started breeding cobras for the sole purpose to sell to the British for the bounty. The British officials got wise to what was happening and cancelled the bounty program, whereupon the locals simply released all of the cobras, exacerbating the problem. The same thing happened with the French in Vietnam, except instead of cobras it was rats. Local Vietnamese bred Frenchmen by the thousands just for the bounty. Then one day it all fell apart. The countryside is still overrun with feral French to this day. I'm pretty sure the term gringos only applies to Americans and is used only in Central and South America. I've never heard of an Indian or African referring to outsiders as gringos. The creation of the internet, intended to bring people together, doomed to divide them. Student loans. The federal government made them easier to get, which led to more people getting them and getting them in larger quantities, which led to tuition rates rising in the current daycare system for 18-22-year-olds that we have now. They just made the problem so much worse than if they had done nothing. It's also a cycle. The more people who are studying, the more companies will raise their standard for the same job, so more people then need to study, etc. Which led to tuition rates rising. That's on the greedy fucking institutions that put their money into fancy shit and advertising instead of faculty. Also, school gets government funding, spend it all on bullshit. School loses government funding, oh no, we're out of money, best raise tuition again. The closest thing is in working as a programmer. When the KP metrics stuff starts, you hear about measuring performance, estimating workload to see how we perform against targets, various procedures that make the whole thing more bureaucratic and are supposed to organize things, agile and continuous delivery. What you'll end up with is something like this: https://www.youtube.com/watch?mark_vecals_b4p55aqvg&ab_chanel=loris peanuts. My parents forced my brother to get higher education. Something about timber engineering. He is a smart guy but couldn't study against his will. So having endured this torture for a couple of years, he dropped out. Now he works in a bar as a musician, free, uncredentialed and entirely happy. All our relatives think he's a lame duck. I think he's goddamn lucky bastard. No need to say I got diploma with honors, good for me. I'm going to take this quite literally, as the first thought that popped into my head was one time when I was around 11ish, I was at a restaurant with my entire extended family, like 50 people, and the waitress was carrying a lot of drinks. I always want to help people, it's in my nature to try and be useful, so I said I'll help you, even though she was doing her job very well. The panic in her eyes as I lifted up my drink from her server plate. The annoyance as multiple drinks then tipped due to the imbalance of weight I had just caused. The apologies were not enough. I felt so bad. It's been 13 years and I still think about it on occasion. That was my biggest oh shit, don't help people if they don't want to, because I was just trying to help. My intentions were good, but man did I cause a massive mess. When I was younger, like 6ish, I used to push all of the products on grocery store shelves to the back, because I thought it looked better and that was how they were supposed to be placed. Now, as an employee at a grocery store, I realize how much all of the employees probably hated me. I once saw the handle from someone's front door had come off and was lying on the pavement. I thought that was no good because somebody could steal it or it could get lost or whatever, but instead of seeing if I could reattach it, perhaps it could click back on, I put it through their letterbox. So now this person's door had no handle to access the handle they would need to get into their house. They saw the end of me doing this. I thought I was going to have to shove my skinny arm through the letterbox and get bitten by the dogs I heard bark in an attempt to reach it. I apologized and they said it was fine. I have no idea how they got into their house, but I really was just trying to help. If certain reports about him wanting to end slavery are true, then Eli Whitney inventing the cotton gin. Going by this theory, Whitney hoped that, since the gin drastically reduced the amount of labor needed to process cotton, then people would use slave labor less. Instead, though, cotton producers simply use more slaves to make even more money, thus, in turn, assisting in the establishment of King Cotton. Eli Whitney also popularized interchangeable parts for muskets that the Union used. His work started and ended the Civil War. I see you two have read Uncle John's Bathroom Reader. That makes me think of the current state of industrial automation. My sew at the time told me that a good friend had cheated on my good friend, told him and he was in complete denial even after seeing evidence over text of her explicitly stating she slept with someone. Got angry at me for being honest. Continued dating her and lost a friend until they broke up like 3 months later because she was constantly always all over other men. You have to be true good friend in these situations and understand you have dropped an awful choice in their laps. Get upset at you or watch their lives implode by ending what they thought was a loving relationship. Most of us take the honest pain, but some opt for lesser pain of losing the friend. Remember that the real asshole is the cheating, so unforgive them for having an authentic human reaction. For most, if they become friends again acknowledging your innocence, it will only strengthen your bond with them. I saw a few guys about to kick the shit out of a dude. I stepped in to de-escalate it until the police could arrive. When they got there, I left and walked down the block to get a cab. The dude told the cops that I, a barely 5 feet 2 inches woman, was the one that started the fight and threatened him. I was a foreigner in China and didn't speak the language. They took me to the police station and questioned me a lot. I was released a couple hours later when a friend of the group told the police that the guy was just embarrassed that a foreign woman saved him. Next time, I'm gonna let someone get curb stomped. Love of my life left me for someone else over a text message. Also happened to be the same night my mother passed from brain cancer, but that was somewhat unforeseen. She lost her feelings for me and always insisted she never meant to hurt me, but she still kept me in her back pocket as a hedge bet while starting to see whoever the other guy was. I forgave her long ago, but that pain never really fully heals, and a small part of me still loves her all these years later. No one gets judged on their intentions, no matter how good they are. We are judged on our actions. I dropped everything and flew to Chicago to help my high-risk mom with one lung and COPD. Dad is a doctor and could potentially bring COVID home. Despite doing all their housework and shopping, creating a clean room to disinfect my dad and his things, I got kicked out because I wouldn't let my mom go to the salon to get her hair colored in April. So yeah, I'm the bad guy. Depression is a cycle of good intentions, clumsy execution, and an unnecessarily massive feeling of defeat each time. If I start a small, simple project, looking for a little boost and it doesn't go well, my mood goes back 2 steps from where it already was. To top that off, getting mad at myself for dwelling on a defeat only compounds the frustration. Depression is like starting from hell and trying to get to Earth base camp. I, also, had to look up the origin of this phrase, because I find it a little confusing. It should be more along the lines of, the road to hell is paved with inaction. A person can act with good intentions and fail, but the original saying is more like, the path to hell is easy, which, I take to mean the path of least resistance leads to hell, which makes a lot more sense.